Hi, everybody. My name is Roberto Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Gfcc. The Gfcc is a global multi-stakeholder organization combining our members and fellows. We have a footprint in 30 countries. It's great to have you here today. This is the fourth of our online series of conversations, Now, Bridge, and Reboot. I will do three things in order for us to get started. First, I will comment with you about this conversation series. Second, I will briefly introduce our conversation today and our distinguished speakers. And finally, I will review some logistics in order for us really to get connected and to see how we can use Zoom, ask questions, so on and so forth. So, as I said, this is Now, Bridge, and Reboot. This whole conversation series was started because of the COVID-19 crisis. At this moment, now, all countries and organizations are responding to the crisis. At the same time, as we talked here throughout the different sessions that we had, we're thinking about a future and maybe how could we turn this into an opportunity, how we can really use this as an opportunity to reboot the economy and society. And finally, how can we bridge what's happening now with that future? What are the actions that we could take to build that better future? As I said, this is our fourth conversation. We are highlighting today, especially different realities around the globe with a particular focus on Asia and the Middle East. So we are looking east. And the motto for the conversation today is to learn from the things that countries, leaders, and organizations are doing around the globe to fight COVID-19, but also to build that future. We have a fantastic group of speakers today. So let me briefly introduce Dan, make a short comments, and we'll get started with our conversation. I'm starting with, we have Deborah Winston-Smith, my boss, who's the president of the Gfcc. Deborah has a fantastic career spanning government, private sector. She was one of the leaders overseeing the implementation of tech transfer offices in the United States when she was the Assistant Secretary for Technology Policy at the Commerce Department in the United States. And she has played a variety of other roles throughout the years. Deborah also is the president and CEO of the US Council on Competitiveness. Joining us from KL, from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, we have Ahmad Tajuddin Ali. Tajuddin is the co-chair of the Malaysian Industry Government Group for High Technology. He has a fantastic career in research and the university world, also has played several roles in the corporate world. He was the chairman, the executive chairman of a power company, the main power company in Malaysia, and he was the president and CEO of the Metrology and Standards Organization in Malaysia and a variety of other bodies. From Abu Dhabi, we have Rashid Al-Blushi. Rashid is the Undersecretary for Economic Development in Abu Dhabi. He was one of the leaders that created the stock exchange in Abu Dhabi with a background coming from computer science and taking that to the business world, also leading one of the main free zones in the Middle East. So Rashid, great to have you in the GFCC, great to have you here. We will be joined shortly from Korea by Tai Shin Kwan. Minister Kwan was the co-chairman. Oh, I see Minister Kwan here. Let me see. I think I will work to get you connected here in the conversation. Minister Kwan, yes, here we are. Tai Shin Kwan will be joining us in a minute. So Minister Kwan was the ambassador of Korea to the OECD. He was the co-chair of the Presidential Council on Competitiveness in Korea. And now he's the vice chairman and CEO of the Federation of Korean Industries. Minister Kwan, great to see you. IT worked, we'll have you connected. We, from Japan, we have Yu Deborah joining us. Yu is the president and CEO of a Forma Corporation. He is an advisor to the board to the Mori Building Company, and he's a board member for Groupe Renault. She has been in that position since 2016. Yu also is the director for international affairs for the STS Forum. She has been working to train leaders, develop leaders, and connect corporate Japan with the world for several years, having lived in Paris, having worked in Paris and Tokyo. Thanks a lot for joining us, Yu. And finally, we have our friend, colleague, GFCC Distinguished Fellow, Jack Singh, joining us from Singapore. Jack is a social entrepreneur. He has founded a variety of nonprofit organizations addressing the business opportunity of the bottom of the pyramid and some of the most pressing issues that we face in the world, connecting business, sustainability, and development. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining. We are taking questions here. If you have a question, please use the Q&A feature here. We already have a comment from our dear colleague, Chad Evans from Washington, D.C., our Executive Vice President and Treasurer at the GFCC. Great to have you here, Chad. Everybody, if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature on Zoom. We're getting started. Really, as I said, the motto of this conversation is to learn, and to learn from experiences around the globe. Today, we're looking east. Asia was hit first by the COVID crisis, so response and reopening are mostly happening there before that in other places. We want to learn from what you have learned. We want to know what you have learned. We want to know about the situation in your countries, but also, what do you see going forward? What are the opportunities that you have already identified? How will this impact business, policy, societies going forward? To get it started, I want to invite you, Deborah, to make initial remarks, and then we'll go around. And please, if you could put your mics on mute while you are not speaking, that would be great. Deborah, over to you.
Good morning, good evening to all our colleagues and friends around the world of the Global Federation of Competitiveness Council. It's great to be here with you all and wonderful to see friends and colleagues and my fellow panelists today for this fourth conversation with the focus on the challenges, the opportunities, what we've learned and where we're headed in the aftermath of the COVID-19 global pandemic with our focus on Asia. And let me just start by saying in our previous conversations, we've had a very deep, rich discussion around many of the challenges that governments have faced, as well as business, and many of the strategies that have been deployed to get our societies and our businesses in a position where they're safe, secure, and we could look forward to the resumption of business and economic life and social life as well. And what we've learned in these conversations that we're in a period of profound, vast transformation. And as we reboot and bridge, we're really looking at redesigning our societies and our businesses. And in some ways, thinking of a new society, a new economy that is really now just beginning to show its sprouts as we move forward. In the United States, I'll make just a few comments. We've learned that communication is vital and over-communicating is vital. We also know, of course, that coordination is critical and it's complex. And I think in the United States, we've had perhaps more complexity than some other countries because of our federal state system that's at the heart of our political system with a very long-standing historic division of roles, responsibilities, and rules and regulations that operate at the state and local level versus the federal. And we've seen that as how the response and the coordination and the recovery of COVID has occurred across the country, with some states having almost no cases and no implications whatsoever, and others having, particularly in large cities, very, very serious difficulties in delivering goods, supplies, communications, etc. Production and flexibility of supply chains has been a huge issue. I think one of the most shocking realities in the United States, and this is true in other parts of the world, but particularly in the US, was the realization that so much of our critical food stocks and supply chains for pharmaceuticals, medical devices, protective equipment had very much been hollowed out in our production systems, and we were very dependent on supplies outside of our nation, and we did not have the redundancy and the resiliency in supply chains. And we've seen how the government took steps to deal with that, evoking a longstanding rule. We saw Ford Motor Company producing ventilators, and very excitingly, a whole emergence of entrepreneurs and the use of additive manufacturing. A great examples in the state of Oklahoma, where the universities came together and have worked with the state and industry, and now almost are self-sufficient in the supply chain for protective equipment. And these universities are all ready to open this fall with their students. So there are many, many different challenges. We've also seen, of course, how telehealth, telemedicine, long promised in the digital frontier, is now reality. And I think we'll never go back to traditional medicine being practiced. People that are well as those that have health issues are very happy and pleased to be able to have diagnosis and communicate with their doctors and medical community through the digital networks of telehealth. And we've also seen increased productivity from our ability to communicate as we're doing here today. And I know that some universities are very proud that within a week, they had over 40,000 learners online communicating through these platforms. And certainly in terms of productivity, I'm sure everyone on this panel can say, and many of you who are with us today, that while you're happy to be on these discussions and we're sharing and we're learning, it is a different life to be working remotely. But I do think that, again, we will see the transformation of work, and we will not return to work as we did before. And very importantly, there's a recognition that we must deal with many of these large challenges, everything from climate change to the importance of equity, to ensuring that we have more of our respective populations fully involved in being able to be innovators, to be able to have the skills and the capabilities to participate in this world that has changed forever. So with that, I want to thank you all. I know we're going to have a rich discussion and very much look forward to everyone's comments. And thank you, Roberto, for your leadership in bringing us together.
Thank you, Deborah. You're very kind. Minister Kwan, maybe if we could get it started with you. Korea is reputed to be a success in dealing with the COVID crisis, but also Korea has an important group of large corporations with global footprints. So what is the situation in Korea? How are you reacting? And how do you see, what are the lessons learned, not just in society, but also in corporate Korea? It's great to have you with us, Minister Kwan.
Thank you very much, Roberto. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
It's very nice to see you, and then Deborah. Thank you for your invitation. And COVID-19 started, I think, from China December last year, and then it spread very rapidly to neighboring countries. So as a result, early March this year, Korea was the world's second largest number of confirmed cases after China. That is China, 79,000 people, Korea, 3,500. The third was Italy, 1,100. But now, as of today, while world's confirmed cases 6.3 million people, Korea confirmed cases only 11,000 cases. This put Korea in the 50th place in the world, and very low mortality rate of 2.4%, globally 109th. The reason why Korea has been very successful comes from some factors, like we had past experiences dealing with MERS and SARS. And in Korea, the top quality students becoming medical doctors. So we have a very talented, and then the experienced medical doctors, and then medical system. And because of the yellow dust coming from China every year, Korean people are accustomed to wear facial masks. That was a good way to protect the COVID-19. And in addition to that, we had a world top-class IT technology and infrastructure. If I tell you an anecdote or how much we have developed, we had very widespread cases coming from gay club named the King Club, but they didn't write names. They didn't write their names and their telephone numbers, but because we had base stations, 20 of them around that area. So we have traced 11,000 people which were connected with those base stations at least more than 30 minutes for about a week. And then we traced all of them. And also Korea was the first country for creative ideas like drive-through screening centers. And then Korea Center for Development, the control was very transparent, and then did a lot of preemptive policies. And in addition to that, we were the first country who produced a lot of testing kits very early. Therefore, we could send it to even USA. But because Korea is very much dependent upon world trade, the dependency ratio of trade to the GDP is about 70%, which is much higher than that of US 20%, Japan 28%. As a result, because of movements, goods and people are all blocked. The first, the hit area industry, tourism, airline industry, hotels, the tax-free shops, and then big restaurants. So we are very much worrying about this situation. So in response, like any other country, Bank of Korea has lowered its base rate to 0.5%. And then government did a lot of expansionary fiscal policy, which is about 3% of the GDP. But what I'm worrying is we should not go back before like a Bretton Woods system, which guaranteed free trade, multilateralism, and then the rule of law. It's all coming from America-led multinational institutions like IMF, WTO. But I'm afraid the functions of these international institutions is not doing well. And while we could see some conflict between China and USA, so I think restoring international order is the very necessary, urgently needed. The world should go back to a cooperative system. So therefore, instead of rule of force, we should do rule of law. Instead of unilateralism, we should do multilateralism. Instead of protectionism, we should do free trade. And now the Korean companies very much worrying about this situation. So because we have many factories in Vietnam, China, so global value chain. They devastated our value chains. So some of them trying to move the, even though it cost somewhat, a lot, than the under time, the delivery system. So even though it may be a little bit more expensive, we wish to diversify our the sources of inputs, and then we should move our factories near the consumer, like USA, Europe. So that's how we are dealing this issue.
Thank you, Minister Kwon, and thank you for highlighting some of the innovations that came out of Korea that are enabled, as you said, by digital infrastructures. I think that what you comment also leaves a cue maybe to what Serizawa-san will comment on changes in global value chains and how the footprint of global corporations is being affected, and some of the lessons related to that. Having said that, Serizawa-san, it's a pleasure to have you. Over to you.
Thank you. Before I go into this global supply chain problems and so forth, I'd like to thank Deborah and colleagues for your invitation today. And I'd like to go back to what happened in Japan. We have faced this new COVID pandemic maybe once again in quite a unique way, at least in terms of policies put in place, with just a minimum number of CPR testing. The Japanese government has been criticized both from inside and outside of the country for this, especially compared to our neighbors in Korea, where heavy testing has been done from the very beginning. And even so that at the beginning of April, the US Embassy in Tokyo recommended that US citizens try to go back to the United States as early as possible, as the Japanese government's policy was not credible with so little testing. But even prior to apps that can trace back to your close contacts and whether you were in vicinity of someone who tested positive, Japan's policy was totally the reverse, like not a massive testing, but rather to implement like a detective-like work by medical institutions in order to identify clusters and sources of infections. And they did that in quite a very analog and traditional way of questioning. I think what was quite formidable then was that most people complied with the questioning and placed priority on public safety rather than their own privacy, and which helped tracing most sources of infections and imposed quarantine on related people in quite an efficient way. At that time also, early on, we had this Diamond Princess cruise ship lesson, which was quite criticized at that moment. But I think because it was a closed environment, it served as a sort of laboratory and a good lesson for the policymakers. I think what was also effective was that Prime Minister Abe at that time also was very vocally criticized for closing down all schools as early as end of February. Japan at that time was counting only like a few dozens infections, and that very unpopular decision still provoked like an almost instantaneous change in the behavior of people. It worked a little bit like a shock therapy. While schools and while the young people apparently were not that much affected, but I think that sent quite a strong signal that it should not be taken lightly. And as of today, maybe the numbers are undercounted. However, we don't see any excessive death. So the figures should not be that far from reality. Maybe take or add maybe several dozens, but still with 127 million inhabitants, which is about 40% of the United States, we are counting 17,000 cases and 900 plus deaths, which is still substantially lower than other countries, especially given the average old age of our population. So in a way, it's called like, again, a sort of Japan miracle. We cannot really explain why. Is it sheer luck? Was it a combination of also like social behavior, no hugging, no kissing, wearing masks all the time, as Minister Taishin Kwan said, but in our country, it's also pretty much common, especially in the winter. Hand washing is also extremely already in place in many places. But anyway, that was for the COVID itself. Now, support for the economy, I think that the Japanese government was pretty fast in introducing policies. They especially concentrated their efforts on small and medium-sized enterprises. I think that was quite smart, because actually, unlike the general perception, the large employers in Japan are SMEs, not the Mitsubishis and not the Toyotas. And so they introduced policies, to secure business continuity centered on SMEs through one cash payment, as well as government guaranteed loans with 0 interest rates. Secondly, to secure employment and employees' revenue, the government also supported up to 80% of salaries when paid during activity decline or even arrest. And thirdly, a one-time cash payment of about $900 per inhabitant. I think but actually what we learned was interesting. I think that now that we are slowly going back to, I wouldn't say normal activity, but still we are starting to reopen things. What we really learned was that this crisis strengthened social cohesion, unlike other countries. We saw that different social classes started to help each other. We saw many more business owners and successful businessmen donating much more money. We saw collaboration between different industries. Of course, as Deborah mentioned, many started to make respirators and other health-related masks and other health-related things. But also, we saw that particularly important was the support between different generations. Before Corona, I think Japan, with this aging population, was seeing more like a disparity between the older people and the younger people and less communication. Now, the younger people were much more mobilized to protect the elderly. Secondly, also, again, it's related to the first point, is that we saw that the people were placing high priority on the social common good, which translated in this case into this common health capital that we had to preserve. So we saw that people were very civilized and disciplined in general. And thirdly, for the economy, we saw that the movements were much faster. And now going back to this global supply chain problem, actually about 10 years ago in 2011, we had this large Fukushima earthquake, which also disrupted a lot of supply chains. So I think that this time, also because it started in China, and China implemented very fast confinement and other measures and closed down a lot of industries, we learned how to replace that much faster than when Fukushima happened. I mean, we were more the suppliers than others, but I think the large industries started to react much more quickly and were much more prepared. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Serizawa-san. And thank you for, in some way, building on what Taixin Kwan has said about learning from previous crises and building resilience at the society and the business level of that, but also for highlighting, if I may say, this positive side of the crisis, like accelerating social cohesion or enabling that. And I think what really remained in my mind was your comment about society-wide social change, right? So thanks for sharing that. Tajuddin, I know that Malaysia has very important experience in terms of responding to the crisis and very positive aspects too. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining, Tajuddin.
Thank you, Roberto, and thank you to Deborah, Gfcc, for this opportunity. Good morning to you out there in the US and Brazil. And of course, for us here, it's already evening. But this is the new order, I suppose. Let me introduce this, put it into perspective. As I think most of you may know, but there will be people out there who's wondering where Malaysia is, maybe. But we are a small country. We have only just 32 million people, although we are in two parts, as it were. One is a peninsula Malaysia, which probably have 70–80% of the population, and then in Sabah and Sarawak on the island of Borneo. Two distinct parts of Malaysia, we call it East and West Malaysia. Of these 32 million people, we have four main races, which is Malays and indigenous people of Sabah and Sarawak, which makes up about easily, I would say, 67%, with about 25% Chinese and 7% Indian. And others that makes up this multicultural country that we have. Now, we have been growing nicely, as it were, quite harmonious country in spite of our diversity. Then came this pandemic. Actually, the pandemic came to Malaysia, Jack, through Singapore. His history has it that because Malaysia, we used to have, I remember I told you about 32 million people. Our tourist arrival for 2019 is about 26 million. So tourism is a big thing. And many Chinese from mainland China is a big group. They come to visit our area through Singapore and come to Malaysia or Thailand and this whole group. So we were thriving on tourist arrivals, one of them. So and the first case that was detected were actually three Chinese from China, from Wuhan actually, that came to Singapore and then cross over into Johor Bahru, which is a southern tip of Peninsular Malaysia. And fortunately, they were detected, quickly detected. And then later on, it came out that there was a big conference, a big international conference in Singapore, where there were participants from Malaysia, there were participants from Wuhan, from China, many from China and from other parts of the world, including the United States. That was traced to be one of the sources of this infection. So quickly, I would say government acted on this very quickly, the Ministry of Health. And by the end of January, on the 25th of March, of January was the first, these three cases that I mentioned, the Chinese nationals that came into Malaysia. And then quickly we introduced preventing the incoming of tourists and so on, and controls were put in place. And there were then during March, the first local transmission was detected. And in fact, it was a major event, a religious event that was held at a mosque attended by, I think about 20,000 people or something, big group. And it became a big cluster. And then the government introduced, fortunately for Malaysia, we too, like the United States, which is bigger, much bigger, but Malaysia too is a federal state, but our federal government is fully in charge of the major issues of health, education, security, and all. And the states only take care of land and natural resources issues. But fortunately, we have this law that was enacted in 1988, I think, if I'm not mistaken, which is the Control of Infectious Diseases Act. So quickly, the government imposed that act, which enables government to act on strict control of movement of people as part of the measure in order to control infectious disease. This was called MCO, is a movement control order under this federal law, and as soon as during that time, the MCO was introduced on the 18th of March. 18th of March. In fact, personally, I was also involved. Affected, not involved, affected, because what happened was I was chairing one of my board meetings, and later on, a few days later, it was discovered that our company secretary was positive because she attended another meeting before that, and she was tested positive. So I was with all my board of directors, had to be screened, had to be tested, swab test. And fortunately, all our directors turned out to be negative, including me. But I was also had to be home quarantined for 2 weeks. That was on the 16th, starting on the 16th. But on the 18th, our MCO, this movement control order, was put in place initially for 2 weeks. It's sort of the lockdown, and then extended for another 2 weeks. And then until today, it's still there, but I will explain a little bit later. There's some relaxation that has taken place since middle of May. So it was close for me personally because, worrying about waiting for the result, whether the test was negative or positive, but fortunately it was negative. Although my company secretary had to be in hospital for more than 2 weeks because she was positive. Although she said, I'm okay. But, we had to go through all that. And the ability of the government to control movement through the enforcement of the MCO really helped a lot in flattening the curve, as it were. It was going up just like everybody else, but very quickly we are able to control. And by middle of May, the government feels that things are beginning to get under control. So there was introduced what is called the conditional CMCO, Conditional Movement Control Order. It was a sort of a relaxation of some of the terms, which enable during all the time, all the essential services were open. People are allowed to go to buy supplies, go to the grocery stores and so on. There's no problem. But interstate travel was not allowed and so on. So that enabled this flattening of the curve to be achieved for the government to be able to open some of the small industries by the middle of May. And the current, CMCO, the Conditional Movement Control Order, is still in effect until today, and is supposed to end on the 9th of June, next week. And we are all waiting for the announcement what is the next, the general feeling is that people are willing to accept, not ready yet to be fully open. But there are pressures because all the time the government is fully aware of while there's a need to balance the health issues, but there's also the need for looking at the welfare of the people. People need to go back to work. People need to go and earn a living, and factories need to open and so on. So it's balancing that between the clamp down in order to control the spread of the disease, and the need to start back the economy. So this is a fine balance. So far, the feeling is that we have reached a point that the situation is under control. Even today, one bad news, one good news. The bad news is that a new cluster has been detected, and the government has announced that that particular region, a small region area, will be under enhanced MCO. So in other words, lockdown, but very specific in that area. The other specialty or thing about Malaysia, out of a population of about 32 million, we have more than 2 million foreign workers. And these are mainly in the construction sector, in the plantation sector. And at the moment now, we find that a lot of the new cases that have been detected is from among these foreign workers that are in Malaysia. I think similar experience in Singapore. And that part, I think Malaysia is learning from how Singapore is managing, especially on these foreign workers. But they are easier in a way because they're staying in identified quarters and places where these foreign workers are staying. So in a way, making the control and a little easier. So that is our experience. Of course, on the economic side, the government earlier on has already introduced economic measures to support direct to the people, especially the lower income group, the one that is needing help and so on. And then later on came in with support to particularly SMEs, particularly to keep people employed and to keep companies able to operate and so on. So huge financial fiscal stimulus has been put in place, small in comparison, of course, in numbers, but from in the context of our size of the economy, it is substantial. And the issue is going forward, then whether we can afford this. So there are other things that I will come back later on going forward, but I can just summarize that apart from the pandemic issue, the health issues, there is this other factor in Malaysia. There was a change in government during this period. So there is, to a certain extent, political uncertainty going forward. And then these economic pressures that, as a result of this pandemic, and the new way, the societal changes that will definitely come into effect in the new era post-COVID-19. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tajuddin. And I think you highlighted this, let's say, a specific institutional reality that you have in Malaysia that for sure, on the one hand, you have early response to the crisis, but you had in place a specific, let's say, legal infrastructure that allowed the federal government to react. And so thanks to highlight that. One question that I wanted to leave to you just to think in now our next round, it's really, you mentioned tourism, and tourism is being highly affected around the globe. So when we think about reopening and we think about industry-specific things, how to deal with the sectors and industries that are being mostly affected around the globe. So I think that's an important connection to the things that you mentioned. Jack, over to you. You are for sure based in Singapore. We just heard a bit about how the flow of people across borders is a critical issue. I know that you've been focusing on that from one specific perspective, but also you as a social entrepreneur have been driving the development and deployment of solutions worldwide. How are those things connected to the COVID crisis and going forward?
Thank you, Roberto. So Singapore has the experience of SARS virus in the year 2003. And during that time, it was a shock. And we have seen how the country people are united and taking care of each other and making sure that they don't infect others and others don't infect them. So this experience becomes very useful this time in COVID-19. The behavior of the people are very diligent. They listen everything the government say. This has been a culture politically very convenient and very easy to control people. But when it comes to COVID, it's also very useful. We were controlling so well that we were named one of the best managed in the world until we forgot about the foreign worker dormitory. And then this starts the second wave and leading us to a lockdown. Before that, we were like Japan, free to go anywhere, just do some social distancing, don't need to wear masks, and later on, okay, wear some masks. But when the dormitory workers start to spread, it spiked. Fortunately, we are now again seeing that everything is receding and coming to normal. The total number of people who has passed away for COVID-19 in Singapore is 24 people. So we are a little bit lucky, but also our population is only 5.7 million people. However, I want to touch on what is the main problem. So hygiene is always the first line of defense against diseases. People didn't want to wash their hands before COVID. 50% of men go to the toilet and they didn't wash their hands after visiting. Women, about 30%. So this is a problem around the world. But today, COVID is basically a hygiene problem, and the hygiene awareness has now gone to the highest ever in the history of mankind. What we need to do is to ensure that this hygienic habit continue after COVID is over. Because I remember during the SARS period in 2013, everybody was also washing their hands, but after it happened, they go back to their bad habits. So this is a permanent culture. We should convert into folklore, into story that mother tell to children, to grandchildren, and this must be a story about long ago. There was a time where so many people died because they didn't wash their hands, because they were transmitting with one another. So I hope we can continue this thing. I saw that the world neglected hygiene and sanitation since the year 2001, 20 years of working on sanitation. I created what is the World Toilet Organization. The acronym is WTO, but not the World Trade, but the World Toilets. The people laugh at it, and because when they laugh at it, they start listening, and it was very, very effective. In 2013, our founding day, 19th of November, became adopted by the UN General Assembly, all 193 countries, to be called the official UN World Toilet Day. And that helps hygiene and sanitation awareness to become escalated. Right now, I am planning with Japanese to export the Japanese culture of hygiene and sanitation and good toilet culture to all over the world, because the Japanese has the highest toilet culture. And we have to promote this as a soft power, the same way they promote sushi or music or quality control. It is a culture. And Sirizawa-san, I would like to work with you strongly on this, because hygiene will save the whole world. Right now, we want to design a world toilet standard. And we have already gathered all the expert professors in the world to design this so that we can break the pathway of pathogens transmitted from one person to another. We have to create a touch-free, hands-free design, but also to go for think about cleaning, maintenance, everything completely. What we have to understand is that as at today, COVID has killed 380,000 people. The whole world has gone into lockdown. Tourism suffers, every business is in trouble. But do you know that every year, 2 million people die of diarrhea? 2 million people die of diarrhea every year for the last 10, 15 years. But nobody cares. 380,000, we have a lockdown. 2 million every year, nobody heard of it. So we have to take care of human beings everywhere. Do you know that 9 million people die of hunger every year and nobody hear about it? So we have to think, is this an opportunity? Now with COVID, there is an economic crisis that is going to follow after this problem. And this economic crisis will create joblessness, hardship. A lot of people are dying of starvation because they were marginal. And in India, in a lot of developing countries, COVID is not killing them. It is hunger that is killing them. Now, I think after COVID, there will need to be a redesign of the world. Here's my recommendation. First, we need to see the 4 billion people earning less than $8 US a day as new customer and a new marketplace. This new marketplace look like poor people, but they are actually the same kind of marketplace before Vietnam became prosperous, China became prosperous. And if you take some years back, even 150 years ago, the Swiss were so poor. And they all got out of poverty because they were treated as customers. The Japanese was very poor after the war, was treated by customer. And the only way we can get people out of poverty is through the marketplace. No amount of donation will ever get people out of poverty. And poverty is a big disease risk. So what we want to do after this, we cannot continue to have a consumption growth calculation. We cannot use GDP as the measurement of progress, because if we measure by GDP, we have a concentration of money only in a few people. What we need to do is to redefine the meaning of success. COVID has reminded us that disease does not discriminate between rich and poor. We are in one world together. So I would suggest we redefine a billionaire as one that improves the life of a billion people. Not need to have $1 billion. If you are honored and respected, it is because you help others. If you keep money, it is your own affair, has nothing to do with society. If we are able to do this, the base of pyramid will become a big customer base. They need water, energy, sanitation, nutrition, housing, roads, electricity, Wi-Fi, cook stove, refrigerator. Go and take this market because this is the biggest elephant in the room, and this is where the world will have a new, better economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. I think this is something that came out in different moments during our conversation, redesigning the world. But you brought this new perspective about soft, let's say, soft power, and translating, scaling up certain values, as you said, sanitation culture, but also seeing the things that we don't see and that we should pay attention. So thanks for raising those aspects, Jack. Rashad, over to you. The Emirates have been experiencing incredible growth recently. So what's happening now? How are you reacting? Especially, I think just one aspect that we can also comment, and some of the colleagues mentioned, as we get more globalized and we had an important flow of people going and working in the Emirates and in Abu Dhabi, in other regions. So how are you responding, and what do you see going forward? Thank you so much for joining.
It's my pleasure, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to thank you for hosting me and to give me a chance to talk about the experience of UAE as a federal country and Abu Dhabi as the capital of the United Arab Emirates. As mentioned, the United Arab Emirates, it's a country of 10 million of the population, whereas the expat who are living in UAE counts to be 90%, 10% only the national. Like all of the stories that I heard now, like most of the countries, COVID-19 was not something that we knew about. It came suddenly. And for the history of the United Arab Emirates, we did not have such a crisis previously. So it was something new to us. And at the beginning, we were like, we've seen cases, 1 or 2. I still remember the first time we heard of it. Then it became 4. Then it started to increase. As a government, what was our reaction toward this increase? Of course, we always wanted to check around us, look around us globally, the expansion and the control that are taking place to manage this condition. Within time, we have agreed that this is something, if we don't control, it would be out of control. So we start to lock down the businesses. We started early with the schools. We said the most affected human being going to be the children, and immediately we took action to close the school. Right after that, we started to close other businesses, including the government. Let's not forget the country is established 1970 as a country we see today. So we've been putting so much into the infrastructure, and we've been putting so much into developing this infrastructure. So it was the way I see it, when we started to close down the businesses, it was a good test to see how sustainable the business is going to continue in UAE and Abu Dhabi. Believe it or not, as a government entities, almost, I would say, 100% were closed. The Department of Economics that I'm running, even running the IT infrastructure, they were done remotely from homes. And the infrastructure proved the continuity of it. As a matter of fact, when it came to the productivity, we've seen the performance of the outcome were improved. Since everything was locked down, I will talk about the positive side. We started to provide services to the stakeholders. Doesn't matter, being big companies, SMEs, individuals. And as we talk today, it's not even the majority of the services are done electronically, but most of them are done less than 10 minutes. And this is how efficient the running of the situation. After that, when we even locked down the businesses, we had a first objective is to see food and medicine available. That came clear from the ruler. The crown prince actually came a very clear message that our first priority is food and medicine. This is why immediately, even during the locking down, we have converted some weaknesses into opportunities. I'll give an example. There are, for example, just in my mind now, there are places where were made for the weddings. When people wanted to get married, they go to those places. We knew at that time people will not get married. So immediately we converted that into areas where we could store the food. Then from there, we used applications relying on the retailers to allow people sitting home ask for the food from the applications. Then when it came to the delivery, we said, you know what, taxis not gonna be available. So we shifted the taxis to be the delivery vehicles of the food. In other words, people were sitting home, foods will be brought in front of their doors. These are one of the initiatives in UAE and Abu Dhabi we have done. Then after that, we said now, before I go to what we have done to open up the market, we went through Ramadan. Ramadan is a very, it's like a holiday, it's a holy month. During Ramadan, usually people, I would say 90% of the people start giving away food, money, they visit each other, unlike what was mentioned in Japan and other Asian, they hug each other, they get close to each other. So the biggest challenge is how to segregate people, how to make them and convince them not to distribute food, not to visit each other. But we have a very strong respect to our rulers who came and they have announced that please forgive us, but we need to stop the distribution of food, distribution of money, and visiting each other. Surprisingly, the reaction immediately took place in the next second. And we started to see people wearing masks. Masks to us is something we were not used to. We have never ever seen a person wearing mask into the street. As a matter of fact, if you go around today, you see people with masks and gloves. Then we have said we don't want to close the market completely. And now we are into the reopening of the economy. Last month, the beginning of the last month, we started to open up the shopping malls. But we put restriction. We said the capacity should be 30%. People who goes into the shopping mall, the capacity of the shoppers, though. People who should go into the shopping mall, they should wear masks. They should be wearing gloves. And they should prove that they are not positive. And when I say they should be proved, because one of the advantages that we've been doing in Abu Dhabi, actually, we did not wait for people to come to the hospitals to do the checkup. We immediately have built up tents, medical tents, and we have distributed them into different areas. And we asked people, we went to people and we started to check them up one by one. Like Singapore, a lot of labor camps we have around us. So we built the tents around the labor camps and we went inside the labor camps and started to check the laborers and to make sure that they are in a good health. Even those who were positive were shifted immediately as a quarantine into places like schools, for example. We were converted the normal schools into places to protect people, and these like we're helping to control the spread of this issue. Now we are into the reopening phases. We started, as I said, 30%, and we are in the first step, the first phase of the reopening program. And we have some criteria, we have some percentage, we have some some issues that would enable us to be shifting from phase 1 to 2. We are very close now to go to 2. What does that mean? Going to 2 and phase 3 is the, for example, if I go to shopping mall as an example, we started with 30%. Now we are about to go to 40% of the capacity to allow the shoppers to get into it, then 50, 70, 80, and 100%. On the other hand, there are initiatives that were like stimulus packages came from the government to support the economy. The objective with those stimulus packages is to keep the cash on the pocket of the businessmen, to make sure that they would pay their employees and to run the economy smoothly. So we, as a government, had a deal with the banks. We've asked the banks to stop asking for the payment of the loans for 6 months. And those up to 6 months, we said you don't have the right to ask for the interest rate. There are businesses were very much affected, like restaurants. Restaurants were stopped completely. So as a government, they have a program to rebate 20% refund of the rental of the businesses, issuing licensing, renewing licensings. We made sure that when a company or a shop is about to do so, the fees are zero, no fees for that. And even the penalties, there are 71,000 licenses were waived from any type of penalties. This is just to make sure that the continuity of the businesses are there. There were like projects were done from the private sector, semi-government sector, to the, we're serving the other parties like the government, for example. We issued a law that the payment of the both goods and gut services must be done within 15 days. Again, it's just to do the kind of settling the payment for the businessmen. These kind of programs enable the economy to not to have a big loss on them. And we are having different programs now to even boost up the economy. But again, our main emphasis now is to make sure that the food provided into the tables with the quantity that the end users usually ask for. And again, the price should never ever go higher than the normal purchase price. This is in a nutshell the treatment from our side as a government to this issue.
Thank you so much, Rashad, and for highlighting the importance of leadership and government leadership, as you mentioned in different moments, but also the opportunity and the need to create innovative solutions. This is one of the topics that will be coming in our previous session last week, really about urban solutions or innovation on logistics and other aspects, as you highlighted. Thank you so much. We'll be back to that. Adan, over to you. Egypt was one of the first countries in the MENA region to face the COVID challenges. We would love to hear from you.
Thank you, Roberto. And I'd like to thank the whole panel and GFCC. It's always a pleasure to join the meetings. And as usual, we come to these meetings leaving with more than we came with. And today is no exception. The situation in Egypt, though we were quite lucky to start with COVID-19 a bit later than other countries, and we saw what was happening, unlike other countries where they were hit with the medical issue first and then economy rolled in. Before we had our first case, we started seeing the effects coming in to the economy, mainly due to what was happening with the tourism industry, because when it was happening outside and travel bans started shooting up and people were frightened to leave home and cancel plans, we started seeing the kickback of that in the tourism industry here. And almost everybody in Egypt is one way or the other related to the tourism industry. So that really took its blow. And when cases started popping up, they did pop up on cruise ships on the Nile in Luxor and elsewhere, by tourists coming in to the country. Now, the government has taken the stand that aside from locking down schools, university, government offices, and cafeterias and restaurants, the rest of the country is functioning normally, with a night curfew that starts on some days 8 p.m. or 5 p.m. or 9 p.m., things like that. So, and they move that number up and down. So right now we're working on an 8 p.m. Curfew till 6 a.m. in the morning. So businesses, private businesses are expected to run normally, even though the government is shut down. In its maybe 60 or 70% of the government is shut down. And but as private businesses, we're expected to operate. Now, unlike what's happened in Italy or in New York or in London, where you see a total curfew and lockdown 24/7 for a length of period that has its effect on the segregation of people and all of that. This is not the case in Egypt. So it puts a lot of pressure on businesses on how to function and how to operate. It's a lot easier if we all shut down because there's no expectancy. But if businesses are working, you're expected to be working. And it's very difficult to work under these situations. Now, of course, we've all, if I come back to the topic of this session, local realities. If I wanted to speak about the reality here and what exactly is happening here, it's every business owner now is having to govern himself and having to take the tough decisions for himself on how to operate under these circumstances. With no clear guidelines and no clear statistics. It's throughout the entire country of 100 million people, less than 200,000 tests have been made. And the policy for making the tests is you have to really be really sick to get the test or very well connected to get the test. So most of these tests are the positive tests, and those are the ones that are recorded. We have a cultural stigma associated with the virus, and people would not want in popular areas to be associated with testing positive for the virus. And we know of cases where people would rather hide their illness than go public with it. So really the statistics and the numbers are really fooling. So at policy level and at local business level, it's very difficult to predict what's going to be happening next. We have so many WhatsApp groups and chat groups where business owners discuss and what's happening at your end, what's happening here, what's happening there. So we're comparing notes and we're formulating our own ideas and our own strategies. Now, it's become very evident that the number one priority for everybody is the health issue, and health takes center stage when anything else is even not needed to be considered. So when it's okay, and people don't really know how to relate to this disease that has already affected, as we just heard, 6.3 million people. And just to put things into perspective, 6.3 million people were affected by something that is weighing less than 6 grams, all of them. So we're looking for something that's really not there. So it's very difficult to convince the simple people of the threat of this, something that they cannot see. So putting on a mask is very difficult. Social distancing is even more difficult. And in our factory, we have to really police and enforce mask wearing and social distancing. And it's until that becomes a cultural thing, and people do it out of convincing. They have to be really convinced that it is something they are doing, not because if they don't do it, they will be penalized. It's going to be a national issue, and it's going to pull us back and give very uncertain dates on when this will end. We are now hearing numbers that are announced of confirmed cases and mortality rates and dates and numbers that we all know that they do not reflect the true figures. Speculations take it that this could keep on peaking into July, and some people take it up into September with numbers going up to 2 or 3% of the population. That would bring us to a couple of million people. Now, when that happens, it's going to be a very tight situation here on the medical front, because as we have seen everywhere in the world, it's no city or no country is fully prepared to take into healthcare all of those people all at once. So it's going to be a very tough call for people in the future if these numbers keep on climbing. Now, luckily, we haven't seen that huge spike in numbers yet, but announced already that officially that all hospital beds are fully occupied, and we know personal cases where people cannot find a hospital bed. Now, putting all these national issues aside, what are we doing as businesses? Because every day we still have to function. We have to go to work. Now, number one, this myth of the best way to work is to have a just-in-time delivery and just-in-time production line of raw materials flowing into the factory in and out. Is just being wiped out, and it's being wiped out by everybody. Now, instead of having weekly or daily deliveries of materials, everybody is now rushing to stock up on what he will be needing over the next several months. And this is hiking prices, and this is going and putting a huge strain on cash flow for businesses. Now, how is the government?
Just want to flag the time to you.
How is the government supporting businesses here? it's very slim, and it's always too little, too late. Now they've launched 100 billion Egyptian pounds, which is really a very little amount compared to GDP, which is around 1 or 1.5% of GDP. And for the informal sector, they've launched a 1.5 million people one-time cash payment of £1 a day for 3 months. Mm-hmm. So we see bumpy roads ahead.
Okay.
I think I'll leave it at that, and we can continue further.
Thank you so much, Ad, and thanks for highlighting this aspect related to business systems and operations, like systems, the need of cash and buffering manufacturing systems and supply chains. Thanks for that. What we'll do now, I'll briefly comment about some of the things that came up. We'll need to close our conversation. So we'll go for a final round. I'll ask everybody to be very quick, but just want to flag to everybody some of the questions that came here. We had a question from Eloisa coming from Brazil about the situation in Malaysia. Minister Kwan has replied to that online about the stimulus package, especially digitalization. I think our colleague Chad Evans asked about Japan and the economic outlook. Thank you, Serisawa-san, for commenting that online, and encourage everybody to check that. And thanks for highlighting this expectation about a V recovery in Japan, Serisawa-san. We had comments about really trust, and this is one of the things that you, Deborah, has been highlighting. You have been highlighting in various sessions that we have here. We had a conversation about social enterprises. So Jack seen comment about the things that he's doing, and Chad Evans remembered some of the things and some of the new funds that are being created coming from private, let's say things that are being done in the United States by Bank of America, but also what's being done by SoftBank. So I encourage everybody to check those questions. And I really wanted to turn to you, Deborah, for your comments, and then we can quickly go around and get the final comments from each one of our speakers here today. Deborah, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. I want to thank all our panelists for really an outstanding set of presentations. And I think just from my perspective, one of the things we've learned today is how important cultural norms and cultural behaviors are in addressing this pandemic, and how we can learn from each other. Clearly, you know, what you, Serisawa, and Jack, and Minister Kwong, and Tajuddin discussed, as well as our colleagues from the MENA, you know, are different cultural norms and behaviors perhaps than in the United States and Europe. And we can see that if there's a way to bridge some of these cultural norms, we might have better outcomes in the future dealing with pandemics, because everybody do it their alone sort of individualistic way that's so prominent in a country such as the United States has actually had negative implications for the response to the COVID virus. So that's something that I think came clear very much in this conversation. I know in our next discussion of GFCC, we'll get more into the innovation, but I just want to close on a positive note, because I think, you know, we have really turned the corners in terms of dealing with a lot of the immediate critical responses of governments and the private sector, ensuring our stability and for individuals and small and medium-sized businesses through stimulus package and things. And now's really a time to begin to focus on the innovation driving, you know, the redesign. And I'm very optimistic we're going to have a vaccine sooner than we think. There's so many trials underway, second stage trials. This will be very significant. But at the end of the day, we have to be designing resilient societies and economies. And as I've said on every call, the glue that holds that together is trust and transparency. So thank you all. And maybe we can go over a little bit longer, Roberto, if people are able to do so, since we had such great discussions. I don't want to cut anyone off, okay? Thank you.
Sure, Deborah, and thanks for highlighting this positive thing about innovation. We saw several examples here. So let's go around and let's try to be very brief here. Minister Kwan, we will give you more time. We know that you were squeezed in the beginning. I also know that you are pressed because of time, but want to turn to you for your final reflections and the questions that we saw here today.
Thank you. I repeatedly told to many people, world, not only developed country, but also developing countries got a lot of the advantages of free trade initiated by United States. But now I'm afraid world is moving back to protectionism. So we have seen the beginning of the 20th century because beggar thy neighbor policy, and then raising tariffs, and then reshoring to think only one country only. Then that will brought the Great Depression and later World War I and World War II. So we must not repeat that kind of mistakes. So in that sense, I think we should go back to the free trade, multilateralism. And in that sense, I think America-led multinational institutions, which we call Bretton Woods system, provided unprecedented peace and prosperity. We should not forget it. And secondly, I think the role of the Gfcc, as we have seen during this pandemic crisis, we have seen the importance of ICT and then fourth industrial revolution. So Gfcc should strengthen its role to generate more innovations, tear down entry barriers, and then more flexible labor market, and then regulatory reform, and then boost entrepreneurship. So we should go that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister Kwan. I think that some of the things that you comment here, as Deborah said, we will return during the next conversations. For instance, we are having one specific conversation about digitalization. So I think that touches upon some of the topics that you raised. Thank you so much for being with us today. Serizawa-san, your comments.
Yes, I would like to very quickly point to 3 points. So one about the free trade and this trust building or rebuilding, maybe that Minister Kwan mentioned as well as Deborah. I think that not because I'm on the board of Renault, but this international alliance between Renault and Nissan and now Mitsubishi is a very important example, because even if your own country is under protectionist measures, some international common things can be done through supply chain, through innovation, common innovation and so forth. And of course, if you know each other already and if you're under a certain structure such as an alliance, you can work much easier. So I think it has strengthened the need of each other, and it has worked in a real good way, although the automotive industry is one of the worst hit industries. Second point, very quickly, tourism, and Japan has been under a lot of pressure as to whether to hold the Olympic Games or not this summer, and now we have postponed it for next summer, but even then we're not certain that we can hold them. And that's a big pressure because a lot of investment has been done toward those Olympic Games, and we are uncertain. Now, third point about this new society and the hygiene and whatever Jack Sim also mentioned, I think that Japan was not born with high hygiene habits. I think this was done also through education. So I would say it's education, education, education. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding us that societies can change. So we can really work to improve dynamics in societies. Thank you so much, Serizawa-san. And another thing is maybe at a certain point, as Deborah had suggested, we could have an extended conversation about supply chains and how business can get connected in this new economy. Tajuddin, over to you.
Thank you, Roberto. I'll come back and maybe continue a little bit further. No doubt we are facing a global challenge, global problem, but I think much of the solution will have to be at the local level, at the country level, and even at the very local, townships and city level even. I fully agree with what Mr. Kwan mentioned, that yes, overall, there needs to be a multilateral global approach to ensure that there is continued economic prosperity and growth and so on through multilateral cooperation. That somehow must be brought back instead of going, through protectionist regimes and so on. But I come back to the Malaysian experience, as it were. To me, looking back and through my own experience and input, whatever little that I could do, we are fortunate that from the very beginning, the government took the attitude of listening to science, to facts, to numbers. And the main spokesman as far as our pandemic on health issues is actually a public servant, the Director General of the Department of Health. So the Director General of Health really every day give a briefing to the media, and very clearly and very ably he is able to communicate and give assurance that of course, that goes to the government at the political level, and the Prime Minister and the Cabinet will make the decision, taking all other factors into account. But so far, the results have been very good, and I think we have addressed that part of the problem. So now is more the economic side, while maintaining I would say control such that we do not have any spikes and so on. As I mentioned, the bad news earlier on that today they discovered a new cluster, but I did mention also there was good news. And I didn't go into what the good news is. Well, good news is just before coming online earlier, I received a note, say, it is a news flash that our Prime Minister, who chaired the cabinet, post-cabinet meeting, and in attendance was somebody who was soon after that tested positive. And in fact, he's gone to hospital. So the Prime Minister and everybody who attended the meeting had to be quarantined. And this was 2 weeks ago. So today, he was tested negative, of course. So today he was cleared. So tomorrow he'll be back at work in the office as normal. So, but it shows that, as said, as we all know, that it doesn't choose who to affect, So, but here, even the Prime Minister obeyed and did his home quarantine and so on. You asked earlier about the impact, especially on tourism. As I mentioned, in fact, it was planned that 2020 is a Visit Malaysia year. 2020 is when Malaysia is going to host APEC meeting. Supposed to be in November. I'm not too sure what's going to happen now, whether it's going to be a virtual APEC. I mean, the official level meeting is going on, but whether virtually, through Zoom or whatever, but whether the full APEC meeting like is done every year, all the heads get together, yet to be seen, because that will be in November. The government has already announced the Visit Malaysia year 2020 is off. We ourselves were supposed to hold a Malaysia Smart Nation conference because we had the Vision 2020. So this is taking stock where we are, what we have achieved, so on. Supposed to have that conference. Deborah has already agreed to come to the conference, but we had to postpone it. And luckily we postponed because we could not have done it anyway. Now we're not too sure because everybody has got to postpone. So the impact on the tourism sector is global. In Malaysia, targeted visit Malaysia here is off. So now number of tourist arrivals, all the hotels, many on sale, many have, not operating at all because there's no occupants coming in, no visitors. So it's a big thing. So it affects the airline industry, the transportation and food and beverages, the conference and exhibition, all this. So it will be a big impact on the economic activity. So it will take some time before this will come. We are not sure whether 2020 itself there will be some growth, but net, I think it will be a recession year. Hopefully that in 2021 things will pick back again. So that's about a positive thing that we can think about, getting out of this, out of the health and pandemic issue, but how to revive back and build back the economic strength and supply chain and everything else that goes with it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tadruddin. So we need global collaboration solutions. Those will only work with have local effective solutions. Chief, science is chief for that. Thanks for reminding us. You also reminded us about that we are all subjected to this situation and the virus. Jack, over to you. You had commented that before. Your final comments. You are muted, Jack.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think that COVID has reminded us about our mortality. Sooner or later, not because of COVID, we will all die. We all die one day, whether it is 90 years old, 100 years old, we are sure to die. If you are reminded of your mortality, what will you like to say to yourself on the last day before you go? Are you going to say that I have a lot of money or a lot of sports car? Or are you going to say that I have done a good job improving the world and there was a difference because I came? If you can find the answer to these questions, you will be able to reflect how to live your life from today to the last day. Full life, but still we cannot waste the opportunity to make the world better. To survive COVID, you need a few health. Physical health is very important. We should not catch the disease. We should also have nutrition because there's so many people who suddenly lost their job, which they earn $3 a day and they have $0 and they actually are dying. This is not a good world because there are people who just send a rocket to space. So this extreme imbalance, I think we need to address in the context of the meaning of our life. Chasing money, in the end, you have no money because every single person died penniless. The second health that I want to tell you is mental health. In such a crisis, you are going to suffer mental health more than COVID because you are going to lose your job, lose money, lose rental, lose a lot of things. Now, make it simple. If you have a problem of money, you have a problem. If you are stressed by the problem, you have two problems. But the second problem is caused by you. The first problem, you can't help it. You are going to lose the money. But the second problem of stress is caused by you. Therefore, my advice to you is lose the money, but don't lose your mind. Stay calm, accept the fact that it is the bad luck, but don't be stressed, because in the such stressful period, there are people who commit suicide. There are people who went into depression for no reason other than losing money. As long as you are still alive, you will have food and you will have a place to sleep. But the most important is you are close to your family, your friends, and your loved ones. This power of love will heal you through this difficult period. And you are not alone. You are not alone. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jack. Over to you, Rashad, for your final comments. Let's build on a positive note.
Sooner or later, this is gonna be gone. It might take a few days, it might take a few months, but at the end of the day, it will be gone. The time we go back to our offices, the time we go back to our day-to-day business, the time we go back to our even families, we should not follow the steps, and we should not do things that we used to do before. Today we have all the infrastructure, all the communication channels to have a radical change to the services that we provide. And when it comes to these services, they should and must be innovative. As I said, while I'm talking to you now, the services that we provide to our stakeholders, we have agreed to make them less than 10 minutes, fully automated. It's not easy. We have old people, we have people who are not having the equipment, but again, having the right motivation to create an innovative environment, this is what we need to follow. We've done a lot of mistakes. We've done a lot of things that we could have done before, but maybe we did not have the guts or the courage to say we need to do the change. Today, when we look at the future, we really need, as mentioned by His Excellency, we're going to leave sooner or later again. But when we leave, we really need to have the radical change that would serve the community and the economy as well. Having a diversified economy, relying on resources that you could have or been taken for granted, this is the time really to look at it, and this is the time to see the change. I'm very sure, as much as I see you, I'm gonna have this meeting again, inshallah, with you, but it's gonna be a completely different environment, serving everybody positively. Thank you again.
Thank you so much. So this is a time for learning and courage. Thank you so much for sharing that, Rashad. We look forward to meeting you. Adan, your final comments, please.
Yes, I just want to say something about free trade. Now, everybody is worried about free trade because right now free trade is at risk. Free trade really has to reinvent itself for it to survive. We all need free trade. We all need free movement of people, and we all need free movement of services. But not the way it was, because right now we will be seeing an increase in local investment in science and education. Locally, people will be needing that hospital next to them, not where they can fly out to it if they can afford it. So you will be seeing developments, local developments, and that has to be coupled up with the free trade and free movement of knowledge and free movement of services and people. That's the only way to reinvent free trade and have it survive. I think that is something that GFCC can work on to see how to rebrand free trade and make it a vehicle for wealth redistribution, to bring people out of poverty and to bring people into prosperity, whereas it had been used to widen the gap. Thank you.
Thanks for reminding us that life has to be better. So, and we need to engineer systems to make that happen. Thank you so much, Adam. Deborah, your final words.
Thank you. Let me just say that as nice as it is for all of us to be here together and to share our thoughts and our experiences and our plans going forward, I say I look forward very much to when we can be together physically, because we have a community of trust. We have a community of relationships that we've built over time. The GFCC is very committed to all of the goals and the aspirations that have been articulated herein. I know we will continue these conversations in the weeks and months ahead, and look forward to all of you being with us in November when we have our 2020 GFCC Global Innovation Summit in partnership with our colleagues in Australia. And interestingly, a year ago, our Australian partners chose the topic of the Innovation Summit for 2020, and they were very prescient because the theme is the competitiveness of advanced technology and healthcare systems to drive productivity and inclusive prosperity. So what we're learning and living through in these months will be very, very important as we gather together in November and continue this journey of understanding, cross-learning, and very importantly, collaborating together to build a better world for our citizens, for our families, and the global community. So thank you all so much. I'm very proud of this brilliant discussion and all of the leadership and passion and humanity that's been displayed herein today. So thank you again. And thank you, Roberto, for your leadership in launching and getting us in this very exciting global conversation on Reboot, Rebridge, and Build the Future Together. So thank you all, and good wishes to everyone for health and safety and coming together again soon.
Before we go, please turn on your cameras. We need to do something here that's to take a group picture. So please have a nice smile. And yeah, let me do this. Yeah, done. Thank you so much for joining, for all of our speakers to be here today. We will be back in 2 weeks, talking local realities again, having a look towards the West. We're focusing primarily on Europe, trying to learn from the experiences of different countries there. It was great to be with you. Thanks for your kind words, Deborah. Thanks everybody for joining. We had people from more than 20 countries today joining. It was great to be with you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.